So today, we're going to dig into the story of a company so powerful it was, well, practically a government. We're talking about a corporation that literally built cities, bought entire legislatures, and left a scar on the earth that will last for centuries. This is the story of the Anaconda Company, an American empire built on copper. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, just look at this number. $300 billion. That's the estimated value of the metal anaconda pulled out of the ground over its lifetime. I mean, at its peak, this was without a doubt one of the largest and most powerful corporations on the entire planet. Right, and all that wealth? Well, it came with just an unbelievable amount of power. And that really brings us to the core question we're tackling today. How on earth did one company manage to basically own an entire American state, go toe-to-toe with foreign nations, and in the end, leave behind an environmental catastrophe on a scale that's, well, it's almost hard to wrap your head around? Okay, so to answer that, we've got to go way back to the beginning, to a place in Montana that would soon earn a legendary name, the richest hill on Earth. So the whole story kicks off in 1881. You've got this Irish immigrant, Marcus Daly, who buys what he thinks is just a small silver mine. But, he starts digging deeper, and what he finds is a colossal deposit of copper. You got to remember, this is the dawn of the electric age, and copper was like the new gold. So after this absolutely brutal fight called the War of the Copper Kings, Anaconda pretty much consolidates all control over the mining in Butte. But they didn't stop there. Their ambition was global. In 1923, they get their hands on the Chuquicamata mine down in Chile, a mine that would eventually bring in something like 3/4 of the company's entire profits. Just staggering. And with that kind of wealth pouring in, the company wasn't just influencing its home state of Montana. No, it was doing something much more total. It forged a system of absolute control that came to be known as the copper collar. And the copper collar, that wasn't just some catchy phrase. It was the reality on the ground. For all intents and purposes, Anaconda was the government. They were a shadow state, pulling all the strings on pretty much every part of daily life. I mean, everything from who got a job to which laws actually got passed. And this really shows you just how deep that control went. Politics? They bribed politicians so openly, it's actually one of the reasons we have a constitutional amendment for the direct election of senators. The media? They owned almost every major newspaper in Montana, so good luck finding any negative coverage. The courts? They made sure cases went to friendly judges. And labor? They had a blacklist system that could absolutely destroy your life if you ever stepped out of line. It was total. And if you think any of this was subtle, it wasn't. Just get a load of this. In 1903, the state government wasn't playing ball. So to force them to pass a law Anaconda wanted, the company just shut everything down. Overnight. Every mine, every smelter. 15,000 people, that was 80% of the entire state's workforce, were suddenly out of a job. Talk about a power move. It sent a very clear message about who was really in charge. But this empire, this incredible wealth, it all came at a staggering price. And it wasn't paid in dollars. It was paid in human lives. Yeah, this really just lays out the brutal math of the whole operation. On one side, you have Anaconda posting record profits, over $100 million in a single year back in 1956. And on the other side, you have the cost. At least 2,200 miners dead in the tunnels under Butte. That doesn't even count the thousands more who had their lives cut short by lung disease. At its absolute worst, they were averaging 1 death a week. 1 a week. It's just horrifying. And what happened when workers tried to fight back, to ask for safer conditions? The company's response was brutal. It started with things like the rustling card system, which was basically a blacklist to get rid of anyone who supported a union. But when that wasn't enough, things got violent. After a horrific fire in the speculator mine killed 168 men, a union organizer named Frank Little showed up in Butte to rally the workers. A few weeks later, he was lynched. Then, in 1920, company guards just opened fire on a crowd of striking miners. Unarmed strikers. The murder of Frank Little was something else. I mean, it was meant to send a message. Masked men dragged him from his bed, tied him to a car, and lynched him from a railroad bridge. And pinned to his body was this note: First and last warning, 3777. That was an old Montana vigilante code. 3 feet wide, 7 feet deep, 77 inches long. The dimensions of a grave. And of course, no one was ever charged. For decades, Anaconda just seemed untouchable, absolutely invincible. But this empire that took nearly 100 years to build, it would come crashing down in just over 10. And it all happened so fast. The first domino to fall was its most valuable asset. In 1971, the government of Chile nationalized the Chuquicamata mine. And just like that, Anaconda's main source of income was gone. Poof! That made them incredibly vulnerable, and in 1977, the oil giant Arco bought them out. But just 5 years after that, with copper prices tanking, Arco pulled the plug. They shut down all mining and smelting in Butte and Anaconda for good. A century of industry just over. But the story doesn't end there, not even close. Because even after the company was gone, after the jobs were gone, after the money was gone, Anaconda left something behind, something permanent, a truly toxic legacy. Case in point, the Anaconda smelter's big stack. This thing is 585 feet tall. That's taller than the Washington Monument. And for decades, it just belched smoke full of arsenic, lead, you name it, poisoning over 300 square miles of the landscape around it. It got so bad, an entire town had to be permanently abandoned and relocated. And it wasn't just what was in the air. Millions upon millions of tons of toxic waste from the mines were just dumped straight into the local rivers. It contaminated a 120-mile stretch of the Clark Fork River. Today, that river is the heart of America's largest Superfund cleanup site. But maybe the most infamous symbol of this whole legacy is the Berkeley Pit. What you're looking at was once a massive open pit mine. Today, it's a giant lake, nearly 2,000 feet deep, filled with what is essentially a toxic acidic soup of heavy metals. To give you an idea of how deadly it is, in one incident, a flock of thousands of migrating snow geese made the mistake of landing on the water. They all died. It's that lethal. So today, the Anaconda Company doesn't really exist. Not as a company, anyway. It's just a name on a liability sheet, a multi-billion-dollar cleanup bill that now belongs to BP, who eventually bought Arco. And the work to even begin to undo all this damage, well, that's going to take centuries. Which leaves us with one last big question. I mean, the story of Anaconda might feel like ancient history, but the themes, they're as relevant as ever. It makes you wonder, when a corporation gets so powerful that it rivals a government, so powerful it can write its own rules, who's ultimately responsible for the scars, both on the land and on people, that it leaves behind?